So welcome everybody. First governance call of 2023. As Felix was just saying, it overlaps with the Cardano Catalyst call. And so does some of our community. So the first topic to address may be the proper time slot for this meeting. Peter and me discussed it prior to this meeting, but we thought, well, this has already been scheduled. Let's not confuse everybody by rescheduling. But our proposal would be to see if we could do it on Thursdays. So on Thursdays, I have bi-weekly team meetings on deep funding. But the other weeks could be filled up with governance meetings. So 2 weeks from now, we could do a governance meeting on Thursday, but then in the same time slot as we have today.
So I think that works well.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. And it's a good way to pace things too, right? 1 week it's governance and the other week is project focused.
Yeah, and maybe if at some point we need additional meetings because there are some urgent things or things we want to discuss more in depth, we did that over the past period. We did weekly governance meetings, but it also was clear also from the retrospective survey that we did is that most people think bi-weekly is okay, and I agree. But should there be a necessity to have some extra meetings or to do a special meeting on a special topic or whatever, we can always schedule that separately and define what is the best date for that. So in this small group here, are there any people that have an issue with Thursdays?
Well, it would coincide with the bi-weekly stuff, European Cardano tunnel, I think. But yeah, that's exactly. It starts half an hour later, but
Thursdays are my only. Thursdays are my only almost call-free days. Don't steal it. Okay. No, but each second week is fine.
Yeah. So for me, Tuesday could also work. We can also create a small poll on it and see what floats to the surface.
Yeah, I'm not saying like Europe Cardano tunnel is a strong blocker. I mean, in the end, there's always going to be some overlapping call. Like
yeah, probably is.
Like for example, Tuesdays I would have the ambassador.
But I also don't want to take away Felix's free evening. I think you really deserve that, Felix. So.
No.
So
no,
but there will always be somebody's free evening that we're spoiling, probably also. So, but let's do a poll nonetheless. Let's decide that most likely we will go to another slot than today's slot due to the Catalyst call. But let's determine whether that should be Tuesday, Thursday. We could even think of a completely different time slot. But yeah, there's no ideal situation in these things. We know that from experience. All right, let's park it for now, and we'll create a small poll afterwards and see if anything clearly surfaces. Then there are two topics I would like to address. First, and it's interesting, Kenrick, that you are here as well, because you might have also some input on that. Is an idea I have about the tooling pool and something I would like to do with that. And I would like to show you, if you're interested, what we're working on with our new website. And then we have the bigger discussion topic on, we have now 3 different meetings. What do we do in which meeting? And also can we start creating a more longer term agenda for all the topics we would like to address in deep funding? I don't think we'll be able in this meeting to do all these things in depth. So maybe one or two things need to be rescheduled to the next meeting, but that's not a big problem. Any other suggestions or topics you would like to address or questions? Then I'll just start with the tooling part. So we have 5 different pools for deep funding this round, and I think that's already working out pretty well. For example, in the first round, we mentioned there's room for marketing proposals, but we didn't get a single one. But now, perhaps because we made a separate pool from it, we already have a number of them. And the same goes for tooling. So also in the first round, maybe it was a little bit early to come up with tooling ideas at that stage. But there wasn't any proposal, and now there are multiple proposals. Now, the challenge that I have currently is that there are a number of things that could fit into the tooling basket that would also really help me from a deep funding management or operational perspective, would help us a lot. So those are initiatives that I start or I initiate. And one good example of that is that I would very much so the first round, the first governance round, we experimented with reputation, and I created quite a large Excel sheet or spreadsheet to calculate these ratings, and I have ideas going to the future that would require even more computation than probably is feasible in any spreadsheet. So this is something that I would require, that I would need. And another example, we have a partner called Sway that is supplying our portal. And there are a few things that are not on their immediate roadmap, but that would be very beneficial, in my opinion, for deep funding. So to give an example, I would have more restricted forms that cannot be completely changed, or I would like to have more order in the feedback. So if a proposal gets a lot of feedback, I would like to have a mechanism where the best feedback, the best rated feedback is flowing to the top. And at some point in the next stage, I would like that to be connected to our reputation system so that people that give comments and that have a high reputation would be more visible than others. Especially this last thing would be very specific, at least at this stage, for deep funding. But also the other ones, if we could give them a little bit of funding, or substantial amount, I don't know, we can influence their roadmap, and we can sort of determine what kind of features we would get. Another example would be having an API that would allow content from Sway to flow into our website without manual operation. So there are a number of things, and maybe there's some other stuff. So basically what I'm saying is there are tooling requirements that are floating up from the community. There's one proposal right now which is called storage. Using storage for AI services on deep funding. There may be a few others in the pipeline. And there are other type of tooling requests that are a little bit more, you could say, top-down, or from an operational point of view, or inside, outside, whatever metaphor you want to use for that. So I've been struggling. we have a limited amount of budget in that pool. And if I would add up all these things and some other things that I know that will probably appear there, then the budget is probably not enough to do all these things. But still, I would also think it would be a missed opportunity if we have to wait another 3 months for starting some of these opportunities. So my proposal, and I thought quite a bit on this, and right now what my proposal would be is that we create a 6th pool in this round, but that pool would only contain proposals from deep funding operational team. So it's proposals that we think are necessary or helpful for a proper operation. But we will still ask the community for feedback and for input on these kind of things. So the examples that I just gave, and maybe there's something else, something other. And when we're done, we will also put it to a regular community vote. So maybe there are 3 things I would like to have done. I would like to have a budget for a reputation, a first deep funding oriented reputation system. I would like to have some budget to have better forums on Sway. And what was the other one? I don't know. Community can give feedback. We'll put it up on a vote, and then the community. So I will explain why it's important, in my opinion, to the deep funding operation. And then we'll have the community vote whether they think the budget should be spent on that or not. And I think this is not just for this round. This is something that we can continue to use going forward, especially on stuff that is more like an investment and that requires, let's say a substantial budget. So if you want to have a license on Otter, like we decided the other day, it's not here yet, but it's still on the to-do list. I think that wouldn't qualify for having a community vote. But if we would want to put out a feature that will take 20K of budget and we would offer that to Sway, that might be something that we would like the community to vote upon. So what are your primary reactions? What do you think of that approach?
Well, I have a lot of questions. One question, it takes a lot of time to get the communications out and then, be clear about each fund. And, we've already kind of extended the deadline on this fund, which I think was a helpful thing to do. But what you're suggesting right now is a much more significant change. And I'm concerned about being able to execute that change effectively in a short period of time. I think the better thing to do might be to take what you're describing as a lesson learned in this fund about the distinction between requirements that are specified by SingularityNET leadership and ideas that come from the community. But I would be very hesitant to say that you should midstream change the way the current fund is organized.
Yes, I thought about the same thing. I was also reluctant, but then again, I thought it doesn't change that much because we're right now in a period for submitting proposals, and the last proposal can still be submitted at the 29th of January. And after that, also for regular proposals, anybody can still offer a proposal. And after that, we have 2 weeks of a kind of stable period where people can give feedback, etc. Of course, it's always better to have proposals in earlier because that way you have more time to collect feedback. But in this case, the proposals would come from the deep funding team. So it could be done rather quickly and they would be in well before the deadline of the 29th. So it wouldn't really change anything substantially on that end.
I assume you're going to split the funding then. You're going to take one of the tooling fund and you're saying you're going to
No.
split it.
No.
Or you're going to add more funding.
Everything that is there will stay as it is.
I see. So you're going to add another pool.
I will add another pool, and in contrast to the pools, to the other pools, that pool will not be budget limited, but instead I will mention these are the things that these are the kind of investment that we would like to do in these cases for tooling and related stuff on deep funding. We will add the budget that is required for it, and then case by case we will add it to the vote. So in the voting process, the community will see 5 pools with an X amount of projects, and each of these projects that they can vote upon. And there will be a 6th pool with maybe 2, 3, 4 proposals with each a specified budget that they can also vote for or against.
Maybe another clarification point then. On this 6th pool that you're describing, you are not asking the community to submit proposals to it?
No. So there are a couple of differences here. So it's an additional pool where only the deep funding team will propose investment. And
by that you mean employees of SingularityNET?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it one question to this point? Are the proposal implementations fully executed by Deep Fund team or Sway, or are there parts of the proposal which are envisioned to be outsourced to the community then as well?
Oh, they can be outsourced to the community. So in the case of the reputation system, we are currently forming a team initiated by me. I asked for that, I organized that, but I will not do the execution. It will be done by others. So that's definitely an opportunity. Also, in the case of the example I gave for Sway, it will be implemented and developed by Sway. So it can be a purchase, it can be a development assignment, and it can be a project. And I can even imagine that at some point people could can give any kind of feedback, right? So they could say, well, Jan, this is a great idea, but this project or a product already exists. Well, and then maybe that would be a better route. Or they can say, this is a great idea, but we would like to develop it. Well, then we can have that discussion. But I think in general, these would be already predefined things that are clear in the terms of the problem they are solving, the way they are doing it, who will solve it, who will develop it or whatever, how much it will cost and what we will get out of it. So that should be quite clear before we put it out. And then we would give the community an opportunity to vote on that.
My question is, what's the use of the community voting on it if we know that there's a need for it and we're like deep funding is coming with the requirements? I'm envisioning that it might make more sense just to gather feedback. What would the vote in this case be beneficial for?
Well, here we need in the future some better processes to determine for which things we do and we don't need a community vote. So there is a distinguishment there. I have some ideas how that will go forward. We're aiming to organize a kind of Singularity community DAO organization, which will also contain probably deep funding as an important part. Going forward, I imagine at this moment that we will have an elected supervisory council that will be able to help me and help the deep funding team to define these kind of things, so define a proper process for these kind of investments. And the way that I currently imagine it will play out is that in such a situation, me or the deep funding team will come up with a proposal, and we will say we would like to have this functionality or this tool or whatever. We think it will have this impact on the deep funding treasury. Do you think it's a good idea? Yes or no, or should we improve it or whatever? And then there would be two outcomes. One outcome would be that this elected committee would say, go ahead, that's a no-brainer. Everybody will agree that this is a good idea. And by the way, it's the budget is relative, but for things that are more less clear, can't think of the word right now, or require a higher budget, I think at some point there would be a threshold where it would make sense to ask the community, do you think this is the best way to spend your money?
Some
more. Oh, go ahead, Felix.
Overall, I think it's a pretty nice idea. But I think we may lose one thing what was previously quite strong in SingularityNET Project Deep Fund. Already you have the funding round, and it's decoupled, let's say, then from the governance experience, right? In Catalyst, it's all mixed into one. And the funding cycle is pretty clear. Projects come to develop their projects, their services, their tools, whatnot. But this year is all about Deep Fund at general a little bit more, right? It's about the infrastructure and the governance much more. So it has its very different objective and purpose, actually. When you throw them into each other now, becomes significantly more difficult now to communicate to the community. Okay, these pools are all for the community, but this one only for Deep Fund. Yeah. And here you can apply for your funds and get incentivized to participate in the ecosystem, but here it's about governance. It's just from this perspective here, it might feel definitely reasonable, but when communicating it to the community, this will be really difficult for a lot of people to understand the difference. And there will be shitloads of requirements just to explain all the time why this both very different intents and purposes now come in exactly the same time frame. Maybe decouple it from each other and say, hey, okay.
That was going to be exactly my comment. I think you're going to create a lot of confusion about what Deep Fund is by midstream adding a pool where the instructions of what that pool is about is completely different from all the other pools. So I urge caution on this. And then I had another question too. Would the vote be decisive on which of these projects get funded?
Yes, although if it's not decisive, then we wouldn't have a vote, right?
Right, okay, so I just wanted to clarify that you're not looking for that as just feedback, but you were saying you would let the community decide which of these investments you want to do. I mean, I understand your desire to have community feedback on these kind of what's more like a governance or internal issue. That's positive. But I strongly urge caution in mixing it up with the current funding round.
All right, point
because you have to take the time to get the communication right, and then you have to think about. You also have. I also think that, like we were describing in yesterday's call, not every decision needs the same process. So you're kind of taking a very different decision, and you're saying you want to kind of insert it into a process that was designed for something else. So I actually think you want to take some time to think about what's the right decision process for those kind of internal investments. Because the other thing too is there's good reasons to have the community vote on things and then let that be decisive, but it's not perfect. You're not going to get, you never get perfect decisions. And for something as sensitive as, the governance of how you do things, internally, you may have clear ideas about which of these investments are critical for you that the community might not have the information about to help make a good decision. So I would also urge caution in thinking that the community, obviously community input is always valuable, but how you get that community input can change from one decision to another.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I think this is why we would need to have some kind of elected entity from the community that would help us and that is more closer and that we can explain and have a conversation with and are more involved than the average community member that we can use for these things. And then they could decide, well, in this case, this is more like a foundational or principal thing. This is something we would need to put to a vote and others not. That is something that I don't know exactly what shape it will take or whatever. That is also up for discussion and conversation, etc. But that is my current thinking that would be a direction to go for with the Singularity Community DAO. But we don't have that already. And as you know, I'm always trying to push. I always have more ideas and things than we have time for. So I'm also thinking of a way how we can start this up. So another question, and I'll get back to you guys after that, would be, what would you, in the current situation, would it be appropriate for the deep funding team to make such a decision? And to what extent should the deep funding team make that decision? Or should we do it together with this group? There was a question in the meantime. I saw Joanna and Peter both have their hands up, so.
Just a thought on that. I know, like in the governance experiment round, I put in a proposal about having a fund that was just dedicated to improving deep funding and tooling and infrastructure. So a continuous fund that's just dedicated to the deep funding processes and infrastructures. And I think, sorry, let me just, but the question here is, even if we were to have that and it was open to the community to put in input on whether they think certain tools or processes should be implemented for deep funding, would deep funding themselves be able to put in proposals in a mission like that? Or is there like a conflict of interest that deep funding teams cannot put in proposals, for example?
That's a very, very good question. So I started out with the idea that deep funding could also put ideas there. But then I was thinking, well, we're now competing as deep funding team with the community on which idea will get funded. And I'm not sure if that is right. So I think it's better to divide these two. So some create, like we have right now, a bucket for ideas and proposals that float up from the community, and have a separate process, at least, maybe not even a bucket, but a process for ideas and suggestions coming from the deep funding team.
The only issue I see there is that like the missions that exist now are for like the general Singularity ecosystem. So there's not one, like even if there's one that's dedicated for tooling and it's written like the general deep funding processes, I think the wider community, because they're not as familiar with that, they probably wouldn't think to put in a proposal or what the improvements are for deep funding themselves. So if there was a dedicated mission for deep funding, maybe that would, I'm not sure actually. Those are just thoughts.
I think we should perhaps keep it separate, and I think the wording of creating a separate tool for the pool for this, that's confusing. In a way, it's not really a pool if there's no size limit. If there's only one person who can put up proposals, yeah, it's not really a pool. And I think broadly speaking, it's perfectly reasonable for deep funding to be able to invest with its from its treasury into its own progress, its own tooling and processes. So yeah, then it might be better to as Joanna also mentioned and proposed during the last community governance round, to get to push the question there instead of during the current round 2. But then that turns the question into what's the timeline of this, because I imagine some of these improvements will also be helpful if they're in place during round 2 already.
Well, during round 3, I think if we can have them voted for in round 2, then maybe we have a chance of having some of the improvements already available in round 3. And indeed, if we wait for the governance round, yeah, that there's less guarantee for that. Yeah, maybe that's a fact of life. I don't know. I think this is a very interesting discussion. So thank you for that already. Kenrick.
Yeah, so now I think I'm also getting a clearer understanding of what you're asking about too. So I think there's actually a deeper question here. Part of what you're saying is there's administrative things that need to be accomplished, and you want to use the deep funding pool to help accomplish those things. So actually, I think before you go down that path, you have a bigger question, and maybe you've already addressed this, I don't know in what way, but in a sense, that's a tax on the deep pool fund for the administration of the deep pool. And so before you allocate any funding at all towards that kind of function, there have to be clear guidelines of what this percentage of that tax is, right? You know, how, I guess my question is, how are you deciding how much funds get allocated for each pool? And then particularly how are you deciding how much gets funded for this administrative function? Because if you don't have a control on that, that becomes problematic. You know, you can sort of trust yourself in terms of that, but as a process, it sounds a little bit loose. It sounds like there's something missing there in terms of a clear process, in terms of deciding how much funding would go into this.
Yeah, there's a lot missing in process, actually. So there's a lot of things we need to, but we are in round 2 only. So I expect when we're in round 4 or 5, a lot of these things will be more clear and we have proper processes. And until we get there, we sometimes have to improvise. So regarding the pools and then the amounts per round, that's now done by the deep funding team, based on token price, treasury, and that kind of thing. And but regarding that special, maybe we shouldn't call it a pool indeed, but that the administrative things, if you want, the tooling, the deep funding tool set, let's call it that. Having it budget restricted might also not be the best thing, because sometimes you need something, you need a big thing to make a lot of progress. Whereas in the next round, maybe you don't need anything or just a small thing. So I think you would have to look at, ideally you would make a kind of business case. You would say, what would it cost us and what would come out of it? And then based on that, you would make a decision.
Yeah, but again, I guess I'm putting my accounting hat on that. You know, it's critical to have constraints on budgets. That's what keeps you in line, and your investments need to be, yes, what you expect the payoff to be, but also what your current limitations are. It has to fit within the limitations of the funding you actually have. Yeah. So if you allocate to this, then you're not allocating to something else. I use a tool. I started using it for my personal financing, and now I use it in my business, called You Need a Budget. And it's I recommend anyone to try this out, because it forces you into the discipline that every dollar of income has a job to do, and you assign that up front. So if what you're saying is you need some extra dollars to do some tool development, well, that has to be unallocated from some other thing that the Treasury is supposed to be doing. You know, and Treasury like this, some of the money goes into the current pool, some of the money is sort of capital for the long term, and some of the money is administrative functions. And then thinking through that process of what the right allocation for each of those requirements, you know, the pools that you're going to fund currently, the capital you need in reserve, and administrative functions that have to be performed. Those things have to be thought out all together.
Yeah, but it can be a little bit more complicated, right?
Yeah. That's an oversimplification. I agree. It's much more complicated than that. Yeah.
For instance, by spending an amount now, we can avoid that funds that are allocated to projects are spent on the wrong projects that are. So we can, for instance, by investing now, avoid that in round 3 and 4 or 5, the system will be gamed with the effect that funding are going to the wrong place. And then you see already that these buckets are interrelated.
Of course.
But I do agree with you. That there need to be some constraints. And that is also part of the journey and part of the process. I really agree. But that is what I thought about that process with an elected committee that would help make that decisions. And maybe at some point there would be a constraint, like you can make internal decisions until a certain budget. And if you go above that, then you would need a special approval from the community. Could even be 3 ways. So a very low budget could be spent by the operational team based on their daily things and insights. A little bit higher budget would require approval from the elected team. And then even a budget that would be even higher than that would require also an approval from the community. That could be a working restriction. But I'm not sure if only the budget would be the determinant for this. It would also, there might be other factors like how controversial is a certain thing, a certain feature or tool or whatever, or how much risk is there involved in something, or how well is it aligned with the purpose of deep funding and SingularityNet. It can be a little bit more nuanced than just having monetary budgets. Cool. Felix.
Well, really, when listening to the conversation, I think what you're speaking about comes much more closer. Also on the document, I've added some links about, for example, the CIPs, the MIPs, the ARCs. And I think what you're speaking about is really much more this improvement proposals. And this idea comes back from the very first days of Bitcoin already, right? Where you had the Bitcoin improvement proposal and the whole methodology which was building around, which is already then a design process where you somehow want to decentralize a decision-making process which is meant to improve the infrastructure, the tooling, the governance process in general, but which has actually not so much to do with the innovation fund than, for example, let's say, right? Already when it comes to the auditability, for example, audit or do quality assurance on a specific, let's say, submitted proposal, which aims to develop a certain service or tool, is one thing. If you want to do an audit now on required improvements on deep fund, when it comes to quite technical, let's say, really requirements of already properly assessed proposals, such reviews sometimes they take fucking months. In the Cardano ecosystem, if you want to audit properly a CIP, can take up to 4 months because it goes so deep into the tech. And the problem is that the best people who know about it are usually the people who work on it, right? So for example, the deep fund team itself, they have to work with the tools. They know the best about the pitfalls, the problems they have with the tools and all this stuff. The participants in the ecosystem in deep fund, they are more working with the consequences of what this team is able to generate, right? Yeah. And this whole thing is, if you mix that, I think if we mix them together, it will, for now, maybe work, but in 1-2 years from now, I think the mix is not scalable. It will create so much confusion and friction even with each other because now you set the same environment where once projects compete with each other in proposals, and where you, for sure, you establish a certain competitive environment. And now dragging infrastructure decisions in the same atmosphere and the same culture, oh, this will become so difficult. And then you end up with the same problem by using monetized tokens for governance decisions, right? The decision then is not what is the best. The decision will end up what is the most, let's say, public, well-received ones, most cheerleaded ones. And I'm quite on board there with Kenrick because we see so much shit on this side. But very often not the best decisions, let's say, are made, but those who are the most wanted and most needed, it's definitely not the same. I would say deep fund is what is the most wanted. Let's say the community comes in and say, oh, I do this, I do that. Okay, this is what we want. But deep fund infrastructure itself is what we need. And if we are able to satisfy what we need to allow us to do what they want, that's great. But they should be separated on some or another way, like we did with the proposals and the governance experiment, right? This was amazing.
All right. Thank you. I love this input. I really love this input from all of you. So yeah, there is some. I understand that maybe we shouldn't mix it with the regular pools. Maybe it's better. Yeah, on the other hand, the question is, should we fit it with the improvement, the governance improvement, because it's not 100% fit with that either. So then the question is, should we have a third round or an intermediate, do this ad hoc, not as a round, but whenever. Aren't we overloading the community with decisions? So the reason for me to combine it is that we have one moment where we make all that budget related decisions and don't overload the community with every week a new vote on something. Or a third option would be not vote on it and have the team. By the way, there's one comment that I have to make right now, just for transparency, also for people who are watching this afterwards. I created, or I initiated the creation of a team for the reputation tool. Maybe it will have another name when we create it, by the way. And two members of this team are also in this conversation right now. It's a great team, and I'm very happy with these people participating. So that's Joanna and Kenrick, and Bill, who's also in Kenrick's team, and Robert Haas. I've asked a number of people if they would like to get involved in this project and basically drive it. Me being more like an advisor, and I'm very, very, very happy that I found such capable people of getting a grip and driving this. So we're early stages there, but I just want to make sure that it's clear to everybody that that we don't get an accusation of mixed. Don't know the English word right now. Belangen. Help me, Peter.
The American people call it boys club. What?
Yeah, well, never mind. You know what I want to say. So I want to be completely transparent. Who is here in what faction, and so I asked these people, and I'm very glad that this is going on one way or another. So going back to the question on financing this. So financing this project, an early project version of this project, which is dedicated at operational challenges on deep funding, and other thing for Sway to enable them to give priorities to some of the things that we urgently need. Are these things that we should put up to a vote? Or are you telling me, to a certain extent, you can decide that centrally with the deep funding team?
Well, My suggestion is the following: is that I think the first step is sort of an internal discussion within SingularityNet about how the administration of the fund is being financed. Now, obviously, a lot of that is through the foundation, right? That is completely separate. But if you're saying that the funding from the foundation is not adequate to do some of the tool development, then you need to think of it in the context of a tax on the deep fund, where a certain percentage of it is allocated for the administrative running of the deep fund. And then if you feel you need community input on that, I think before you decide what you're going to spend that money on, I think you'd have to create some guidelines on what the size of that tax is. And I would make it analogous to a little bit, you know, I can give you some analogies with the Catalyst program, right? So there's a lot of rewards given for participation in Catalyst, and those rewards come out of the treasury too. And so that the amounts were kind of decided in the original design of the Catalyst program. And so, you know, at the same time, I think both the Cardano Foundation and IOHK put a lot of their own investment into the administration of the program. So anyways, that to me is what has to get sorted out first. Maybe you've already had those conversations, and that's part of what is bringing that to the table today. But that if you haven't had those discussions, I think that's the first step.
The reason why I'm discussing it and the trigger is that I have need for tooling, but I don't want to start spending the deep funding treasury on that without any discussion on that. I think going forward, if you're a couple of months ahead in time from today, we will start to make the proper structures that will enable us to make these kind of decisions in a better way. But in the meantime, I'm time pressed to already drive things forward. So I'm already getting ahead of that and seeing if we can already make a start in these kind of things. Regarding costs and current costs and the foundation, my salary is paid by the foundation. I do a lot of work and spend a lot of time on deep funding, obviously, but Peter does as well. We are paid by the foundation, so there's no pressure from that on the treasury. But I also would like to make a different differentiation at some point between operational costs that we would need, maybe also in the future for deep funding. I do think at some point, so like you say, the incentives for the community are paid from the deep funding treasury as well. And and there will be some other operational costs at some point that might also be paid from that. As investments would go, the investment in a tool or whatever, development, that is a little bit different. That's more like OPEX, CAPEX. And so I think that might require another approach. I'm completely with you that you could make very easily say something like an X percentage of the treasury or of each pool would be paid out as an incentive for community members. And similarly, you could say an X amount of percentage can be spent on operational support for deep funding. I'm not 100% sure if that same process could also work for things that are more an investment that will pay out and for which you can make a business case even. That might even bring in or have more benefits than expenses, basically. But that brings me back to the question. So let's make this very concrete. This is the thing that I've been struggling with. there are a number of important tools, and I think there's also one project coming on in Pool E that I favor a lot, that I expect a lot from, which is completely initiated by a team that I'd rather not compete with, but may have to if we put these proposals out. So one option would be just to put these proposals, both any budget allocated to features on Sway, the reputation system, other interesting proposals, just put them in Pool E and have the process as it is outlined right now, meaning we have a restricted budget, so some of these things that we want to do, we will not be able to do at this moment. That would be one possibility. Another possibility would be, well, the one that I proposed, which you don't like. And then the third option would be something in the approach, like in the direction like we'll have better processes in the future, but until we have those processes in place, it's okay to make central decisions on budget. And then we could decide whether there would be a limit to that or not.
Also, when looking, let's say, for example, on improvements, where you say, okay, how does Deep Fund need to improve? It might be quite interesting, actually, to start really much more with a storyline about a really streamlined process from funding round to funding round and what happens in between. What we know is once the funding round happens, it's mostly there where we have the highest engagement, right? Where we can also capture the experience from the participating groups. Means this is also the moment where we can get the strongest insights and feedbacks and perspectives on what should be improved, actually. So if you design a retrospective area stage just after,
I agree,
take this input.
But the question now, immediate. So you have now a challenge. How are we, so we can have a confidence round after this and discuss this is what happened and how can we improve it? Completely with you, 100%. But how are we going to address this situation right now?
Yeah, so maybe I can speak to that. I urge extreme caution in what you're describing. As you know, part of my professional experience is doing internal research for a large company. And the most difficult thing that you see go on is the way these programs get corrupted. Because leaders in the company have very strong opinions and they have very strong influence over these processes. So it's just hard for them to step back and let the process play out. And I've seen it both in terms of CEOs just canceling projects or directing the funding in particular ways and not trusting their research teams to make the decisions. I've seen it in department managers who also served as reviewers and made sure that the members of their department got funded that was the real priority. And the things you're describing are along that line. You have needs as a manager of this process. You see gaps in what you're able to accomplish. But to go the next step and then try to insist that treasury, which you're overseeing for community development, be used to meet those gaps, creates a conflict. And so there's three levels. The first question is there funding? The first question to find out, is there funding within the foundation to support these administrative needs? I'm assuming no, based on your interest in using the treasury to do it. But nevertheless, that's a discussion that should go on within SingularityNet. Maybe some of the foundation budget needs to go into this tool development. Then there's a second discussion about, you have clear guidelines right now that members of SingularityNet don't submit proposals, right? that's important, because otherwise you kind of you reduce the integrity of the program, and so you're now trying to get around that. And then you go a third step, and this does affect even my own work, is like you provided guidance on putting a team together, and a group of us have, you know, taken that on, but there may be members of the community that don't feel that process itself made things a little bit unfair. So even that, like that one maybe does need to be, we need to be careful about it. So I don't think you're ready to use Treasury funds to do this development work, because you haven't gotten the right authorization, it sounds like to me, from either the foundation in terms of how the fund is to be managed, or from the community. And so even though you have this urgent need, you're gonna have to be careful in terms of how you fund that need.
Wow. I appreciate that, Kenrick. Also because this might impact the opportunity to get funding for the project that we're that you are so energetically driving already. So I respect that a lot, that you give this opinion, even though it might not be in your direct personal interest. And I hear you, and I'm inclined to, if others are having the same ideas about this, then maybe I have no other choice than following it, meaning that some of the progress that I would like to see in deep funding will probably be delayed for 3 months or something. Joanna.
Yeah, just following what Kenrick said, I think like an immediate response to this is just to keep the process as is and just rely on the fact of the people handling like the project that you mentioned, but also other processes that you see importance in, and just making the proposal very strong and trusting that the community will see value in it. I think we're still in an experimental phase, and then that would also show that maybe it's a good way to even see whether the community itself sees these values in improving deep funding processes. And the outcome of that would be to know, okay, if such projects didn't get funded, then that's a result, meaning that the community doesn't see value in deep funding processes being improved, and that means it should be a separate thing, because obviously there's a need to keep improving these processes and creating tooling for deep funding. And based on that, you can make better decisions on whether it should be a completely separate process, it should be a completely separate pool, it should be a completely separate round or something. But I think for this specific round, I think the best option is just to keep it as is and see whether the community sees value or not.
All right. Then we'll keep it as is. I think both Kenrick and Joanna, maybe also Felix, are you of the same opinion? All right.
General for don't rush for decisions.
This is a moment of the governance board in action, and you really pushed me back in my cage, which is a good thing, right? This is what it's about, supposed to be all about.
But I think like I don't want to disregard the importance of having some sort of process or funding or allocation or something to improve deep funding continuously. I think that's something that we see a problem in Catalyst, that we kind of forget about the actual core infrastructure and we're just focused on the outcome of what Catalyst brings and the implementation and stuff. So that's what I kind of mentioned in the other proposal, is I think there should be continuous efforts to improve processes, infrastructures, community involvement, whatever, just for deep funding as an entity.
Yeah, so what we will do is we'll continue to discuss and think about the processes and the guardrails that we need to adhere to. I totally agree that we need to be cautious, and there are different ways of doing that. So maybe I'm going too fast right now, so push the brakes here a little bit, even though it hurts me, because I really want to drive a lot of things forward. And I know now, out of the 3 or 4 things that I would like to start working on, I know that with this budget, not all, even though if the community would like all these proposals very much, there's simply not enough budget to do all of them. I would be very surprised if there is. So that means that there will have to be some choices made, and some things. Maybe good ideas will have to wait until the next round, like 3 months in the future.
I just wanted to add there, as Kendrick mentioned, on trust and integrity. These only built very slowly, and they're potentially gone very quickly. So I think on that side of things, it does make sense to be slowing down a bit.
Wow. I've never expected that would be comments that I would get from the community. Now you have to slow down a little bit. I only expected people, this is not going fast enough. Where is the result? Show me.
I think it's like learning experiences from previous catalysts just moving faster than anyone could even imagine and just going out of control. And these projects are, I think, long-term projects, and they can grow very fast. So some way that they can all get funded is to scale them back and absolutely what's needed now, because I think even when you're putting in a proposal, you're thinking way too future and so many features. But just from what we've learned yesterday is the implementation initially could be very, very simple and get things rolling like that,
All right, we're already way ahead in time, so we have like 23 minutes left of our time. There are 2 things, so I'd like to wrap this up. Basically, the conclusion that I take for now is that I made a proposal. You say we should leave it as it is, and at least this round not make any changes. We'll think about it and communicate and discuss it properly, and then we can address it in the next round, maybe also combined with other developments around DAOs and community-driven structures in SingularityNET. So that took a little bit longer than I expected, but I really, really like this discussion, and I'd like to thank you for pushing back and engaging in that discussion with me. So the other 2 topics on the agenda, 2 or 3, one would be I could give you a quick look on and an idea of the vision that I have in evolving the deep funding website. The other thing is discussing in more depth how do we see the evolvement of the evolution of this meeting, governance group, the team meeting, and the town hall that Felix is organizing. And also related to that, what are the topics that we would like to discuss in meetings like this, and would it be possible to already start making an agenda for the next month or longer, so that we know what is being discussed when. Will never be 100%, but we can at least have some topics planned. Obviously, we won't be able, and I already warned at the beginning of this meeting, we won't be able to do all of that immediately today. So what should I give preference? What would you like us to do right now in the remaining time of this call? Now, come on, people, you were so vocal just a moment ago. You must have ideas on this as well.
Everybody still has his head in this previous topic. I'm sure. Maybe website would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because Felix, you made that Miro board. Thanks a lot for that. So I feel a little bit guilty in not using it now. But let's say that we can use, then we'll address it next week, in 2 weeks from now, the time slot to be determined. And then give people an extra push in already pre-filling it, so that we have a filled board before the meeting. We can still do some work in the meeting, but all right, then so about the website. Before I show some sketches, they are not real design screens yet, or maybe some more and some less. I'll share a little bit of my vision on the deep funding side, but related to that also the deep funding program, how I would like to see it evolve. This is again my centralized vision on that. So I'm really looking forward to your pushback on that as well. So in my ideal picture, deep funding, let's say 3 years from now, would be still have the funding program in place as we see it today, maybe more sophisticated with more checks and balances and better reputation system and expert groups and whatnot. A completely mature, well-functioning funding program. But what I also would like to see is a kind of collaborative environment. I love these meetings. I also love the meetings with the teams. And I especially like it when I see discussions between different teams and different team members and things like, oh, I can help you with this, or I have this problem and this is how I address it. And so what I hope that we will see happening in the future is to see more collaboration and a community. So in the end, what my aim would be is to make deep funding from a fund into a community, and a community of builders where the teams would be collaborate and exchanging information and helping each other, etc. Which would also require better sooner than later, to be honest, some educational content. So what is most needed at this moment would be better education on how to onboard on the platform. But I would also do it a little bit wider and give some information about what is that ecosystem, the technology behind all this. What is OpenCog Hyperon? How does it relate to the platform that we're building? What is AI DSL? And how can AI DSL work with all the services that we are building? And what is the vision behind it? But also what is the technology behind it? What is Meta, the language? And how can deep funding teams in the future use that language or that framework that we're building to their advantage? So there's a lot of things that we could educate people on. Making that content and presenting it in a proper way is a challenge in itself, but we're talking about the 3-year vision, right? So with that community idea, I want to make also deep funding website bigger. And one of the things we need to address, that's a no-brainer in my opinion. We have now awarded teams, but I also want to have proposals on the website and awarded projects on the website. Very simple thing. But then the next step would be, right now, the pages of the awarded teams are still on the Sway portal, and I can do some things there. I can add the milestones there with links, but they're hard to find. They don't have all the information that I would like to have, and it's not on our own deep funding website, so it's not a good branding experience. In my ideal world, I would like to showcase all the awarded projects, and I would like to motivate the community to continue their engagement with the teams also after the vote has been done. And for that to happen, I think we have to give more visibility to recordings such as this that we create, but also recordings of the team presentations, and from now on also recordings from the town halls, for instance, make them more visible. And I would like to have every team that is awarded to have their own detail page. And on the detail page, we can have the original proposal. We can have everything that's related to the team. We can have their milestones there. We can add the statuses of the milestones. If they have a presentation, we can add them all there and we can stack them up. And ideally, in some kind of future, I would also like the teams to have access to that information themselves, or at least part of that information. Maybe some parts need more central steering, like where are you with your milestones? Would make sense that the deep funding team would be in control of that. But having news items or a kind of microblog or whatever telling the community this is where we are could be perfectly managed by the teams themselves if they would be interested. And you will see that some teams will be very active there and some teams won't be active at all. That's fine. It's an opportunity to engage with the community, to give more attention to your project, and to show to the world what deep funding is about and what it can do and what it can accomplish. So that's my big rant about the vision. Any questions so far, or I just want to see the pictures related to it?
So just one thing I directly have in mind, maybe David and Pete made this something what we could link to the ambassadors program, because there we have already a quite dedicated pool of very committed and engaged people. And some capacity where I can say, hey, content creation, engagement, whatnot. There are quite some folks already very active.
Yeah, and I think many of them are kind of looking for opportunities to get more involved. There's definitely that enthusiasm that can be harnessed. Definitely. And just to reflect on your comments, Jan, I totally concur with the questions you're raising, the information that you need to give from deep funding and kind of where the vision is going so that we can kind of help with that transition from coming outside. I think that it takes, in a way, a bit of vulnerability to say, okay, this is where we're going, this is what we can do, but here's what we can't do. I think so we can help you in the right way.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Yeah, so any ideas and suggestions also about getting more engagements? That is important in itself, to have that conversation and to drive that. Also a very good topic for the next governance rounds. We could have a session once on getting how to get more involvement from community or from the developer community in here. All right, let's just share. I'll share my screen. I'll show you a little bit of where this is going. So remember, these are sketches, and a lot of it is not actual content, but just dummy content. So what you're seeing here now is right now we have in deep funding, maybe I can open it here, deep funding. We have awarded projects. This started out, this menu item, as project proposals, but then we got into the next stage. We didn't have a lot of resources to change this. So we simply changed the names and we filtered out the awarded projects. But right now I have a need to also present on this side already the proposals that are coming in. Now, in an ideal world, I would like to have an API connection with Sway that would be automated somehow, but we're not there yet. And I would have to have better forms so that the summary is also actually a summary and not 2 pages of text, which is sometimes still the case. That aside, I would like also on the deep funding page that people could see the summaries of the projects that are being proposed, like I did in round 1. But right now we don't have the space for that. But this would be the new design. And I hope we can put that live even before this round closes, but not long before. So what you will see here, these are still the awarded projects, but you would be able to filter them on the round or on a certain pool in a round. So you can filter down the projects. You will see here all the main information. We would also have open proposals, so that would only be the current round. Submit proposal would go, I think, to the portal. Voting on proposals would only be active on the moment that there's actually a vote going on. And basically, the information here is the same as in awarded proposals, but here you would have all the proposals that are currently also in Sway, but not the whole proposal, only the summary. So, because I think right now this gives a better overview than the summaries created by Sway, and I would like to have a little bit more control on that, and present them in a nice and easy to consume way, also for the community members that I expect to vote on these proposals. I want to make things as easy and as good an experience as possible for them. So these are open proposals. Then we also have round summaries. So this will give you factual information on each round. So, and this will be filled during the round as the round progresses. So some information will be there in the beginning and some will only be there after vote has been cast. So total funding amount, the pools that are in this round, the amount available per pool, and then number of proposals submitted and awarded will be entered after the vote. So you can also go back to previous rounds and see how many pools were there, how many money was there allocated, how many proposals were there in that round, etc., etc. And
one short question, Jan. Does Sway has open API access?
No.
No.
That is one of the things I might want to propose to ask them to build, which you blocked just now. So
there you go.
And I'll take my revenge immediately. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it is actually a fact. That would be one of the things. So another thing I would really want them on Sway is to make sure that the summary field is restricted to 400 characters. So I can just put it in here. And now some people, even though I mentioned this should be 400 characters, people make a very long text there, and that doesn't help anyone. But these are the kinds of things that I would, and that's a simple thing, right? So an API is a substantial thing. Making that form a little bit more restricted would be, well, it's also not quite unsubstantial, but so these are the kinds of things. But so what you will also see here are some blogs that are related to that round. So there's also a connection to the rounds, to the proposals, and to the blogs that are written about it. So you already get that integration of all that information. Now, in round one, there were quite a number of blogs that I wrote about it with all analysis and insights. As we continue, maybe in time there will only be one blog that just describes all the results of that round. But we'll see how that will play out. All right, so these are the 3 tabs here. If I go back to awarded projects, then I could also click on a single project, and then you would get a project overview page. The first design was similar to what you see, is that still here, like this, with a left navigation and then everything vertically stacked. I argued to have more like this 2-column thing, because I would like to show to everybody who will come to this page that there's activity on this project. So I would really like to have at the top of the page visible what is the latest presentation that this team gave. And show it there, and then the previous one and the one before that, so that people have an idea of how active this team has been in the deep funding program and how engaged the team is, but also just informational, showing and seeing the progress that they are making.
Oh, yeah. Can you open the live chat, because this might be actually quite interesting for you, especially for this topic. When you go on the live chat, I throw a link there for live donation, it's called.
For
not sure if you
live chat.
In the live chat when you open the messages.
In Zoom.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I really have to look at that. So there are a number of links there.
I mean, the last link I add, or wait, I throw it just once again.
Okay. The live donation?
Exactly, yes. Because when you go on the link, it's actually pretty nice what I built it. So it leads you directly to groups which built in around Catalyst. And if you click on any of them, what they usually do, they just pull out the data, everything what is public from Project Catalyst. And then they create some statistics already to say, oh, okay, also by the ranking things and stuff and everything. And it lists also, okay, what has been most mentioned words and whatnot. And then lists all the proposals, approved as not approved ones, and then everything.
I think it's somehow similar to the approach that I am.
Exactly.
So there are.
That's quite nice, Felix. Thanks for
vertical.
showing us that.
Sorry?
I was just thanking Felix for showing that. It's quite nice.
Thank you, Felix. Yeah, also on behalf of me. So what I'm trying to aim for is that you have vertical deep information, and that would be team detail page, so that you can show you everything related to a team. So just to show there are status reports. So we have this 6-weekly survey cycle. And you want to give that more visibility also. So here you would find back, and this is not a really good example, by the way. This text probably won't be here. But that you can see, okay, what is the progress of this team over the last 3 or 4 surveys that they entered, so that the community also has a way to audit and to see what this team has been doing. Another important part, which is actually also on Sway right now in a more limited form, is to show, to add in advance after the team is awarded. These are the 10 milestones, and then follow up with statuses. So you can always see, everybody can see and know where to find it, what the current status of this is. Not 100% sure if we should have the team members in there, but because that will not always be formatted in the same way, and not 100%, but I do like it from a personal touch that you actually see the people behind it. And here we could also have an entry which will show, oh, this team also did these projects, so that you have also information. Oh, this team did already 5 projects. Let's see how they progressed in the other projects that they are involved in. And that's also another way for having real governance. And then maybe as a last one, this is really, I think it would be great to have some way to get in touch with the teams. And it can be for critical reasons, if the community thinks, well, you haven't answered your survey for the last 3 cycles, your status is still the same as half a year ago. What the F are you doing? That could be one scenario. Another scenario would be, this is such a cool project. Can I be part in it? Or I have developed something that you could also use. Or maybe it would even be another awarded team in deep funding that would say, hey, listen, can we collaborate on this? Number of opportunities there. So it would be great to have some kind of interaction. Now, all this will take time to build. And ideally, so let me show you the menu system. So this will show you basically the layout of the new site. So you would have projects with 3 tabs here, and the proposals. Awarded, open proposals, round some or proposal portal would go to Sway. This is all information that we have now also under rules about deep funding itself. I will now go to the 4th one. This one would be dedicated to everything related to the platform, to education, to technology and that kind of stuff. And then this one, progress, would be like a hub which shows more in horizontal everything that happens. So not all the presentations that a team ever made, but the latest presentation of all teams. If we would add the survey updates here, it would not be all the surveys that a team did, but the latest survey entries of all the teams, and so on. So this would have the latest of everything. So you could go to the overview page of this thing, say all updates, and you will always see what is happening in deep funding. You will see, oh, there's a blog. Oh, there was a new presentation from a team meeting. Oh, there was a recorded governance call like this one. So that you always have one place to stay up to that. That's all for now. And it's 1 minute past time, but I'll still give you opportunity to give feedback. I'll close the screen for now. Do you like the direction?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Great, thank you. Any suggestions, ideas, feedback?
On your website, do you have the stats on how many people visit this from their mobile phone versus the desktop?
Good question. Yeah, we have Google Analytics, and you would be able to see that, right? So you're asking about the mobile experience, I suppose.
Yes, I'm watching from my mobile right now, and first of all, I love your idea on the layout. Just looking at it from the mobile right now, it is very difficult for me to read the headlines in the deep color gradient.
The current website.
Big headline.
Okay. That's
the one you just shared on the screen, which you said that's not the current version, I believe you said. That's the vision you have. The one you just shared on with us.
Oh, sorry. I was looking. I was forgetting that I stopped sharing. I was showing.
Yeah, the one you just shared with us. So when you scroll down, you saw the headlines in the color gradient.
Yes.
Yeah.
So...
That is fairly hard to read.
But
to me,
it's impossible that you will be seeing this because this is still restricted. This is the live site currently, right? So if I scroll up, and if you would look at on mobile, it would look a little bit like this. So it is responsive, and we are putting a lot of effort in making that a good responsive experience.
Oh yeah, actually that's a really nice color scheme it's a really nice color scheme. It's just from when the text gets smaller and it has the gradient, it is difficult to read. But for the bigger fonts, I think it's fine.
Okay. And where do you see that? The smaller, so I showed you maybe it's this.
That was on the previous page when you scroll to the bottom. That was the previous, I think one of the previous slides you shared.
You don't mean this, do you?
Oh yeah, these ones, the project program process.
But you haven't seen this on your mobile yet, have you?
No, not. I've seen it on my mobile, right? Like I'm seeing it on my mobile right now.
Oh,
it's just from what I'm seeing right now.
Of course. No, this is just an InVision design, and actually, does it? No, it's not responsive in InVision. So this is just a sketch, but it will work similar to the live site right now. Or we don't have that here right now. We do have to have it on SingularityNET. We have also something like this. So you should see these things here at the top as a kind of quick links. And then this is your menu, which show the whole menu in the 4 main sections of the website. But this will be totally responsive. Maybe I will be inclined to make a shortcut here and there, but our UXer is really serious about that. So we'll make sure that gives a good experience on mobile as well. Yeah. So actually. Let me see. Can I? So that.
But yeah, the 2-column layout I really like with the video on the right. I think it's a really good idea to have the video format and 2-column format I really like.
Oh, I like that support. Thank you.
And then sorry about this. The status report and milestone report idea I also really like. I just probably would make it a little bit more visually pleasing, but the idea is.
Yeah, so the status report. So there's short-term and long-term here. In the long term, I would like to have that survey being completely integrated, and we are now building on WordPress, so there will be something built into WordPress. And well, I can. Due to time, I won't get into that right now. On the short term, there will be more menu operation, and maybe there will still, so we're now doing it with Google Forms, so maybe there will still be a Google form, and some things will still be ugly. Right now, we're sharing a lot of information in a spreadsheet. But the biggest problem right now is I'm pretty sure that very few people know how to find that spreadsheet. So the first goal would be to make this site make it clearer to everybody where the information is, and then maybe at some point when they click, they will still see the ugly spreadsheet. But then in the next stage, we will make that all web native content. And the goal is to say goodbye to that spreadsheet. I don't want to use it anymore. But step by step, incorporate that in these pages in a proper way.
Yeah, no, definitely really well done on the layout ideas of the site. It seems really clear and concise and
great. Yeah. Thank you. I'll pass on the compliments to the UX designer Craig, my colleague. So. Looking forward. So this is another fun part of deep funding, to be able to develop that. And I wish I could move fast forward to 3 years from now and see all the great things that are in my mind right now. And but probably it will look much different in reality. But that's also part of the fun.
I do have a little question. It would be nice to hear more information on how you see that process in terms of utilizing the community and how internal you want that within deep funding, whether the process is to kind of get into deep funding and build it out, or to build things outside, then link it to deep funding, and in this way.
Are you talking about concrete features, functionality, or are you more talking about
more the 3-year vision that you're?
Sorry?
The 3-year vision that you were talking about.
What I would like to do is to facilitate that vision by developing or integrating the functionality that is required to make it. And then, of course, it's a joint effort to make it so. I mean, the only thing I can do is make presentations like this and offer features, but that doesn't make it a reality. So in the end, we do need engagement, and we do need community members, or we need team members, and that's a journey. So this is today my vision. It's very well possible that if you ask me the same question, what is your vision in a year from now, that you will hear another story with new insights and new things, and maybe we also have said goodbye to some things. But that makes it interesting, and you saw that actually in practice today. Right, I came here with an idea, and we changed ideas on that, and now it will go in a little bit of different direction. So I expect that to happen a lot, and I see it as my main job to build processes and procedures and facilitate that process up until a moment that the process is completely self-directing and self-enforcing, and that the least important person of all these things is me.
Cool. Yeah, that's nice. On that note, I think there's definitely an opportunity to kind of sound the horn, sound the beacon a bit more, whether that be a kind of like for instance, when writing about the meetings, I think today you didn't say the time, and I think it could be procedure to kind of like say the information, all the information about like the time and when a bit more in different groups, so it's kind of people catch it a bit more. There's also, I guess, some things we can do, like put in a calendar on Discord and things like this, just so people, when they want the information, they can go to that place, then they can see exactly, okay, these things, how do we get involved?
Yeah, you're right. I think we need to do that a little bit more professional, maybe even visually. I'm thinking right now, I never thought about it, to be honest, strangely enough. But make sure that we have a proper format, an image where it starts, it gives the date and the agenda and thing in the proper format, that scrolling through Telegram or Discord, you will easily recognize it, and not in a last moment text like I did today. You're 100% right. Yeah. Oh my God, there's so much we can improve here. Then again, we're only round 2, right?
But David, let's bring this to the ambassadors as well, that we maybe take some responsibility there and make sure with Pete, because Pete knows all the dates as well.
Yeah,
that he spams it on the ambassadors and we throw it out then.
Definitely. And I think that could be, that could just be like these kind of more passive jobs that are kind of given out. And I think, definitely we can work on that. Cool.
Talking about the ambassador program, one last thing, and then we really should stop I can still go on, but in respect of other people's time as well. When developing this website, my initial idea was to try and automate as much as possible to keep it efficient in respect of my own time, but also to ensure that we don't need additional people on the deep funding team and using the treasury that well. Right now, I'm thinking that maybe we can do it better in a different way by automating too much stuff that will already fix it. So a better way of developing the site is doing the minimal stuff, starting with the front end, doing more content entry manually until we find the right amount of detail and the right format and the right process that we say, okay, now we can improve this by automation. That means that if we are doing all these things and we have this update page with all these updates, and we want to keep track of all the deep funding detail pages, project detail pages, and so on, there will be increasing manual work there. And I was actually thinking about reaching out to the ambassador program that Peter is leading, or maybe to you guys, if there would anybody be willing to assist with that. And yeah, then we will assign some deep funding treasury tokens to that in a reasonable amount, if you agree with that.
No, we don't want tokens.
But save your cash.
But if Grandano would hear this, he would just jump on fire. And Eric as well, and some other folks were there, definitely.
So this is a call out, anybody interested in assisting with the new deep funding website when it comes to place and helping us keeping it up to date and maybe doing some other things that are helpful. Yeah, let me know.
That sounds great. I think yeah, like Felix says, the other ambassadors would really love this. And I think just to reflect on the optimization of processes, I think definitely it's an optimization that still needs the person-to-person contact and the kind of the meets like this, which are so good. I think yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot. Yeah. This meeting went a little bit different. Well, maybe not quite, but different than was on the agenda. So there go agendas. I had a previous meeting before this that was the same. But nonetheless, it was extremely interesting. And I thought it was also very worthwhile. So thanks a lot. I'll think about these things a little bit further. And in the meantime, we'll continue to work hard on making this website a reality, but manage the expectations. So the first thing that we will try to put out is the proposal and awarded teams and summary overview page. That's something you might see in the not too far away future. Things like project detail pages, information hub, educational stuff will all follow in their own pace at a later stage. We haven't decided on the priorities yet.
Cool. I just have one request. It would be really nice, Jan, if you would like to come to one of the ambassador meets where people can talk to us directly. I don't think you need to come up with a framework so that we can be involved. I think we can definitely start it organically with just a conversation that we can also help with that from our side too.
I'm open to that. So there are some tasks that this is again inside out, outside in, bottom up, top down. I don't know. There's some things that I think we need and would be helpful to get collaboration with, but maybe there are also things from your end that can grow spontaneously and organically. And for sure, I don't have all the ideas, right? So maybe other people have very good ideas, like Felix started the initiative of the town hall. Great, wonderful. So yeah, if you want me to join these meetings, then yeah, invite me, give me a link. I'm quite pressed right now at the moment, I must say, but I will make an effort to be there.
Nice, I'll throw it in the group. Yeah, Felix. Nice, cool.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks a lot, Felix. Thanks a lot, Judith. Thanks a lot, Joanna. Peter has already left us. And some other people that joined and left it also, I think. But great meeting. Thanks for your participation. Hope to meet again in about 2 weeks, but we'll find a proper slot.